The woods behind our house in Willow Creek were more than just a backdrop for childhood games, they were a part of us. It was impossible to separate our days from the rhythm of the forest, the way it whispered through the trees or the way its shadows seemed to come alive in the late afternoon sun. Alex and I grew up there. It was our playground, our escape from the world, and in many ways, it was where I thought we would spend our lives, just the two of us, exploring the endless mysteries it held. When I think back to those days, it feels like another lifetime. Before the snake. Before everything changed. Alex was always the fearless one. I suppose every younger sibling sees their older brother as invincible, but with Alex, it was more than just admiration. He seemed to have an innate sense of adventure, a confidence that carried him through every scrape and tumble without a second thought. I was the opposite, cautious, always second-guessing. But that was the balance we had. He would run ahead, and I would follow, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. The fort we built in the woods was our kingdom. It wasn't much to look at, a ramshackle structure of sticks and twine, precariously balanced between two trees. But to us, it was everything. We spent entire summers there, pretending we were explorers in some forgotten land, or soldiers on a secret mission. The world was small then, just the two of us and the forest. Our parents knew we played in the woods, but they never worried. In Willow Creek, the woods were as much a part of life as the seasons, familiar and unthreatening. That's how it felt until the summer when Alex turned 16. It started like any other day. The sun was high in the sky, casting long, golden rays through the trees. The air was thick with the hum of cicadas, their song blending with the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I was in my room, sprawled across my bed, lost in a book. I can't remember what I was reading now, something simple, something that felt far removed from the real world. But the memory of that moment, the sound of the cicadas, the feel of the pages beneath my fingers, is burned into my mind because it was the last time things felt normal. Alex burst into my room, breathless, his face flushed with excitement. "Sophie, come on, you've got to see this," he said, practically bouncing on the balls of his feet. I groaned, rolling over to look at him. "Alex, it's too hot to go outside." But he was relentless. He grabbed my hand, pulling me to my feet before I could protest. "Trust me, you don't want to miss this." There was no point in arguing when Alex was like this, so I let him drag me through the house and out into the sweltering afternoon. The heat hit me like a wall, thick and oppressive, and I immediately regretted agreeing to follow him. But Alex was already disappearing into the woods, his excitement palpable. I had no choice but to go after him. We walked deeper into the forest than usual, past the familiar landmarks of our childhood. The trees here were older, their trunks wide and gnarled, their branches creating a thick canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The air was cooler here, but it carried a different weight, heavier, quieter. I hadn't realized until that moment how far we had ventured from the paths we usually took. There was something unsettling about it. Finally, we reached a small clearing, a place I had never seen before. In the center of the clearing was a massive rock, its surface smooth and weathered as if it had been sitting there for centuries. But it wasn't the rock that caught my attention, it was what lay draped across it. A snake. But not just any snake. It was enormous, easily the length of a car, with thick, shimmering scales that seemed to catch the light and reflect it in 100 shades of green and gold. Its body was coiled loosely around the rock, its head resting on the edge, watching us with dark, unreadable eyes. "Isn't it amazing?" Alex whispered, his voice filled with awe. I didn't respond at first. My eyes were locked on the snake, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something wrong about it, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Alex, let's go back," I finally said, my voice barely more than a whisper. But Alex didn't move. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving the snake. "It's not going to hurt us," he said, his voice calm, almost hypnotic. "Look at it, Sophie. It's beautiful." Beautiful wasn't the word I would have used. Terrifying, maybe. The way the snake moved, so fluid and silent, the way its eyes seemed to follow us, it felt too intelligent, too aware. My stomach churned with unease, but Alex was captivated. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, just staring at the snake, his face alight with wonder. Finally, I managed to pull him away, but even as we left the clearing, I could feel his thoughts lingering behind, with the snake. After that day, Alex changed. At first, it was subtle. He started spending more time in the woods, returning to the clearing every chance he got. I went with him a few times, but the clearing made me uncomfortable. There was something about the air there, thick, stifling, like it was pressing down on me, suffocating me. The snake was always there, coiled on the rock, watching. It never seemed to move, but I could feel its presence, like it was waiting for something. Eventually, I stopped going with him. I told myself it was because I was busy, that I didn't have time to waste sitting in a clearing, watching a snake do nothing. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of the snake, yes, but more afraid of what it was doing to Alex. He became obsessed. Every day, he would disappear into the woods, sometimes for hours at a time. When he came home, he was quiet, distant. He stopped talking about the things he used to love, the books we read together, the plans we had for the future. Instead, he would sit at the kitchen table, staring out the window, his eyes unfocused, like he was somewhere else entirely. Our parents noticed the change, too. They would ask him where he was going, what he was doing, but he never gave them a straight answer. "Just out for a walk," he would say, his voice flat, emotionless. They didn't push him. I think they wanted to believe it was just a phase, something he would grow out of. But I knew better. Something was wrong. Then came the nightmares. They started about a week after we first saw the snake. I would wake in the middle of the night to the sound of Alex thrashing in his bed, his sheets twisted around him like a cocoon. He would mumble in his sleep, his words strange and disjointed, like fragments of a conversation with someone I couldn't see. Sometimes, he would call out to the snake, his voice soft and distant, as if he were dreaming of it. I would try to wake him, but even when his eyes opened, he wasn't really there. His mind was somewhere else, lost in the depth of whatever was happening to him. During the day, he seemed normal enough. He would go to school, eat dinner with us, laugh at my dad's jokes. But at night, it was like something else took over. Something darker, more sinister. I tried to talk to him about it once. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we were sitting in the backyard, the sun warm on our faces. I had been working up the courage for days, rehearsing what I would say. Finally, I turned to him, my heart pounding. "Alex," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "What's going on with you?" He looked at me, his expression unreadable. What do you mean? You've been acting different, I said, struggling to find the right words. Ever since we saw that snake. For a moment, he didn't respond. He just stared at me, his eyes dark and empty. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was cold, distant, like he was humoring me. You're imagining things, Sophie. I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. I knew it. And deep down, I think he knew it too. The nightmares continued, growing worse with each passing night. Alex stopped talking in his sleep and started screaming. Blood-curdling screams that would wake the entire house. Our parents tried everything, taking him to the doctor, giving him sleeping pills, but nothing worked. The doctor said it was stress, that he was going through a difficult time, but I knew that wasn't it. One night, I woke to the sound of rustling outside my window. It was late, the moon high in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. I slipped out of bed and peered outside, my heart skipping a beat. Alex was standing at the edge of the woods. He was barefoot, dressed only in his pajamas, his hair disheveled from sleep. But his eyes were wide open, staring into the darkness of the forest. Alex. I called softly, but he didn't respond. Panic surged through me. I pulled on my jacket and ran downstairs, slipping out the back door. The air was cool against my skin, the night silent except for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. I approached him cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. Alex, what are you doing out here? I whispered, grabbing his arm. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the trees, his face pale in the moonlight. I have to go, he murmured, his voice distant, as if he were speaking to someone else. Go where? I asked, my voice rising in panic. It's the middle of the night. You need to come inside. But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring into the darkness, his eyes wide and unblinking. I have to go back, he whispered. It's waiting for me. A chill ran down my spine. What's waiting for you? The snake, he said, his voice barely audible. It's calling me. Terror gripped me, and I shook him, trying to snap him out of whatever trance he was in. Alex, please, you're scaring me. But he didn't respond. He pulled away from me, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he were being guided by some unseen force. He stepped into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. For a moment, I stood there, frozen in place, my mind racing. Then, without thinking, I ran after him. The woods were different at night. The trees seemed taller, their branches twisting together to form an impenetrable wall of darkness. The path was barely visible, and every step felt like a struggle as I pushed through the undergrowth, my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear Alex ahead of me, moving quickly through the trees, but I couldn't see him. The shadows swallowed him whole. Alex. I shouted, my voice shaking. Please, wait. But he didn't stop. He just kept moving, his footsteps growing fainter as he disappeared deeper into the forest. I ran faster, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the woods seemed to close in around me, slowing me down. My feet slipped on the wet leaves, and I stumbled, my hands scraping against the rough bark of a tree. Panic surged through me. I couldn't lose him. Not now. Not like this. Finally, after what felt like hours, I broke through the trees and into the clearing. And there he was. Alex stood in the center of the clearing, the snake coiled around him like a protective embrace. Its body shimmered in the moonlight, its scales gleaming like polished emeralds. But it wasn't the snake that terrified me, it was Alex. He was smiling. I stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, watching in horror as Alex stood there, smiling, completely entranced by the enormous snake that was wrapped around him. The sight of it made my blood run cold. Its body was coiled around him like a lover, and yet Alex didn't seem scared at all. If anything, he seemed content. I took a shaky step forward. "Alex, please." My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with fear. "You don't have to do this. Let's go home." He looked up at me, his eyes glazed over, far away. "Sophie," he said softly, his voice strange and distant, "I belong here now. It's where I'm meant to be." The words chilled me to the core. My brother, who had always been full of life, was now speaking like someone I didn't recognize. I wanted to scream, to tear him away from whatever force had taken hold of him, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed, caught between the instinct to run and the need to save him. "You don't understand," he continued, his voice eerily calm. "The snake, it showed me things I never knew about myself. It's been waiting for me, Sophie. My whole life, it's been calling me, and now I finally answered." "No," I cried, stepping closer, tears streaming down my face. "That's not true, Alex. This isn't you. You're my brother, you belong with me, with us, at home." But Alex shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "I can't go back. It's too late." The snake's coils tightened around him, pulling him even closer. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by that same eerie calm. He reached out a hand toward me, as if to say goodbye. "Don't worry, Sophie," he whispered. "I'm not afraid anymore." And just like that, he vanished. The snake slithered away, dragging Alex with it, deeper into the shadows of the woods. I tried to follow, to pull him back, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, helpless, watching as my brother disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by the very forest we'd once called our sanctuary. The days that followed were a blur. Search parties combed the woods, but they found nothing, no sign of Alex, no trace of the snake. The clearing, once our playground, was empty, as though it had never been touched by the strange and terrifying presence I'd witnessed that night. People in town began to whisper about the woods, calling them cursed. They said that strange things happened to those who wandered too far in, that the forest had a life of its own. But no one really understood what had happened. No one but me. For years, I kept a secret of what I saw that night. I returned to the clearing sometimes, hoping, praying that I might find some trace of Alex, that maybe, just maybe, I could bring him back. But the woods were silent, and the snake was gone. Now, when I walk through the trees, I can feel the pulse of the forest beneath my feet, as though it's hiding something just beneath the surface. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can still hear Alex's voice calling to me, faint and distant, from deep within the shadows. But I know I never follow him there.